There's a silence that hits harder than any argument, the kind that freezes a room, steals the air, and makes everyone look at each other like they just witnessed something sacred and forbidden all at once. That's exactly what happened when Isaac Plath spoke those two simple sentences that no one saw coming. The Plaths, a family that had spent years trying to control every word, every image, every narrative, suddenly couldn't control the truth. It slipped right out of the quietest son's mouth. And in that instant, everything that had been carefully hidden under layers of smiles, faith, and politeness cracked wide open. Hi friends, this is Sarah from Sister Wives, Chapter and Reality Scandals Daily. If you love uncovering the real human stories behind reality TV, the ones the cameras only half catch, make sure you're subscribed and turn on notifications. I want to hear your thoughts in the comments too, because after this episode, a lot of people are rethinking everything they thought they knew about the Plaths. For years, Welcome to Plathville showed us a world that seemed frozen in time. A family tucked away from modern life, raising their children with traditional values, strict boundaries, and a deep belief that they were doing things the right way. Kim and Barry Plath, the parents, built their image on purity, faith, and control. The children, Ethan, Mariah, Micah, Lydia, Isaac, and the younger ones, lived under a roof where innocence was everything, and exposure to the outside world was seen as danger. No phones, no sugar, no pop culture, no dating. It wasn't just a lifestyle, it was a bubble. But like every bubble, it eventually met the real world. And when it burst, the pieces didn't land gently. The first cracks showed when Ethan married Olivia, a woman who challenged Kim's authority and refused to live under the same quiet control. Their tension became one of the most explosive storylines in reality TV, and it sent shockwaves through the entire family. Mariah began rebelling too, experimenting with freedom, music, and self-expression, while Micah stepped out into modeling and independence. For Kim and Barry, this wasn't just rebellion, it was betrayal. Meanwhile, Isaac stayed quiet, loyal, respectful. The son who still looked up to his parents, who helped around the house, who seemed to carry the weight of everyone else's choices. To most viewers, he was the calm in the middle of chaos, a reminder of what the Plath family used to be before fame, conflict, and heartbreak took over. But what no one realized was that Isaac had been listening all along. Behind those soft-spoken answers and quiet smiles, he had seen it all. The late-night arguments, the emotional distance, the separation between Kim and Barry, the confusion of the younger kids caught between two worlds. And when he finally spoke about it, when he admitted what he really felt, it wasn't loud or dramatic. It was just true. His words stopped everyone in their tracks, because they weren't cruel, they weren't rebellious, they were honest. And that honesty hit harder than anything anyone else had said in 5 seasons of Welcome to Plathville. When Isaac spoke, fans could almost feel the air shift. It wasn't just about taking sides between Kim and Barry, or between the older and younger siblings. It was about naming what everyone had been too afraid to admit, that the family's version of perfection had already broken, and pretending otherwise was breaking it even more. That's the power of truth in families like the Plaths. They can hide behind rules, behind faith, behind appearances. But truth finds a way to speak, even if it has to come through the quietest voice in the room. What made that moment even more haunting was that Isaac didn't seem angry. He wasn't attacking anyone. He was just tired of the silence. You could see it in his face, that mix of loyalty and heartbreak, of wanting to make things right, but knowing he couldn't. It wasn't a dramatic rebellion. It was emotional honesty. And that, more than anything, is what exposed the family's deepest wounds. For Kim and Barry, that moment was a reflection they couldn't escape. For the siblings who had left, Ethan, Mariah, Micah, it was bittersweet proof that their little brother saw what they had been trying to explain for years. So, what did Isaac really mean? And how did those 2 short sentences manage to expose everything the family had tried so hard to hide? That's the question we're diving into today, not through speculation or rumors, but through what the show itself revealed. Because this wasn't fiction, this wasn't scripted. These were real people on real camera footage, finally facing the emotional cost of years spent living two versions of truth. When Isaac spoke, he didn't just expose a family secret. He forced everyone, including the viewers, to confront what happens when silence becomes survival. Did his words break the family, or did they finally free it? That's what we're going to find out. Because in Welcome to Plathville, silence was never peace. It was pressure. And when that pressure finally broke, it came from the one person no one expected, Isaac Plath. And maybe that's what makes this story so unforgettable. In the beginning, the Plaths looked like a family from another time, peaceful, pure, and perfectly in sync. On Welcome to Plathville's earliest episodes, you could almost feel the calm hum of their Georgia farm. The golden fields, the barefoot kids, the music drifting from the family band. Everything about it looked untouched by the chaos of the outside world. Kim and Barry raised their 9 children with a clear purpose: protect them from anything they believed could corrupt their innocence. There were no phones, no internet, no soda, no TV, and certainly no talk of dating. The Plath family's life revolved around faith, family, and discipline. To outsiders, it seemed idyllic. But to anyone paying attention, that perfection was more fragile than it appeared. Kim's way of parenting came from conviction. She believed strict boundaries built character. Barry went along with it, quiet but firm, trusting his wife's vision. Together, they created rules that left no room for compromise. The kids grew up believing that the world beyond their fences was dangerous, that their parents were their shield against moral chaos. It worked for a while, until their children began to grow up, question, and dream. Ethan, the eldest, was the first to feel the walls closing in. When he married Olivia, everything changed. Olivia came from a similar conservative background, but was determined to build her own path. She introduced Ethan to small freedoms, things like trying new music, drinking Coca-Cola, and questioning the rules he had been raised to never doubt. That might sound small, but in the Plath world, those were acts of rebellion. Kim and Barry saw Olivia not just as an influence, but as a threat. And the tension grew until Ethan was forced to choose between the woman he loved and the parents who raised him. That conflict became the heart of the show's drama. Not because it was sensationalized, but because it was heartbreakingly real. Viewers watched Ethan and Olivia try to build a marriage, while Kim and Barry refused to let go of control. Conversations turned into confrontations. Family dinners turned into emotional battlefields. And somewhere in the background, Isaac was always there, listening, observing, absorbing everything in silence. Mariah was the next to break free. Her journey was different. She wasn't interested in fighting. She just wanted to live. She started exploring self-expression through her clothes, her music, and her friendships. When she began wearing jeans and performing songs that reflected her pain, it wasn't rebellion for attention. It was rebellion for survival. She needed to breathe. And every time she tried to, it felt like Kim and Barry were trying to pull her back into a version of herself she no longer recognized. Then came Micah, the golden boy, polite, charming, and naturally gifted. His modeling career became his ticket out. At first, Kim and Barry didn't know what to do with it. Modeling clashed with everything they stood for: exposure, image, individuality. But Micah was determined. And when he left home to pursue his career, it was another quiet goodbye that tore one more piece from the family unity they once had. By season 4, the Plath family's perfect picture was gone. The older siblings were living on their own. Ethan and Olivia were barely speaking to Kim and Barry. Mariah was navigating her independence and heartbreak. Micah was carving out a life that looked nothing like the one he was raised in. Kim and Barry were separating, struggling to explain to the world and to themselves how the family they built with such conviction had splintered right before their eyes. And right in the middle of it all was Isaac. He didn't run, he didn't argue, he didn't take sides publicly. While his older siblings were finding freedom, Isaac stayed home. He helped Barry with work around the property, supported his younger sisters, and tried to hold on to whatever piece was left. For a long time, viewers saw him as the symbol of what Kim and Barry wanted their children to be: disciplined, respectful, and loyal. But that loyalty came with a cost. Every time he watched a sibling leave, Isaac was caught in a silent tug-of-war. On one side, the love and respect for his parents who had raised him with faith and structure. On the other, the pull of his brothers and sisters who had stepped out into the world and found new versions of themselves. He loved them all, but love wasn't enough to fix what had already broken. As the seasons went on, it became clear that Isaac was growing up in two realities. One still anchored in his parents' authority, and one forever changed by the siblings who refused to live under it anymore. You could see it in his eyes during interviews, that quiet struggle between wanting to stay loyal and wanting to understand. The Plath family's divide wasn't about good versus bad. It was about control versus freedom. Kim and Barry's beliefs had given their children a foundation, but also a cage. And for Isaac, that truth was slowly becoming impossible to ignore. Every reunion, every attempt at family healing, carried tension you could feel through the screen. The smiles didn't last long. The words, "forgive," and "move on," hung in the air, but the wounds were still fresh. And through it all, Isaac stayed calm, trying to be the bridge no one else could be. But bridges can only hold so much weight before they start to crack too. By the time Kim and Barry officially separated, even Isaac couldn't deny how different everything had become. The home that once echoed with harmony was now filled with uncertainty. He watched his mother begin to explore independence, while his father tried to steady what was left of the family. He saw the younger kids adjusting to a new kind of normal, one without the rules that once defined them. And still, Isaac didn't say much. Not yet. But his silence was growing heavier with every episode, because when you're the one still standing in the middle, watching everyone you love move to opposite sides, the truth eventually becomes too big to keep inside. That truth, the one Isaac finally spoke, wasn't just about who was right or wrong. It was about what happens when love, faith, and control collide. And once he said it, there was no going back. It happened quietly. No dramatic music, no editing tricks, no staged tension. Just a teenage boy sitting under the heavy air of a divided home, finally saying what everyone else had spent years avoiding. In Welcome to Plathville Season 5, Isaac Plath, the youngest son who had stayed silent through every storm, finally spoke. And when he did, it stopped fans in their tracks. For years, Isaac had been the background heartbeat of the Plath family, the steady presence in a world spinning apart. Viewers watched him help Barry with chores, comfort his younger sisters, and stay respectful even when the world around him was splitting down the middle. He was quiet but observant, the one who never seemed to pick sides. But by Season 5, even Isaac couldn't hide from the emotional wreckage that had become the Plath family reality. The moment came in fragments, scattered through episodes that documented the family's slow unraveling. Kim and Barry were separated, both adjusting to their new lives. Ethan and Olivia were barely in contact with them. Mariah was drifting in and out, still angry and hurt. Micah was physically there but emotionally detached, always halfway between compassion and distance. And Isaac, left behind in the middle of it all, was trying to make sense of a family that no longer made sense. There's a scene midway through the season that fans still talk about. It's simple. Isaac, sitting outside, his baseball cap pulled low, his hands fidgeting. The producers ask him how he's handling everything: the separation, the distance from his siblings, the changes in his home. He pauses for a long time before answering. His voice is calm, but the words carry a weight that feels years older than he is. "I just wish everyone could stop trying to prove who's right," he says quietly. It feels like no one's listening anymore. It's not a dramatic outburst, it's a confession. And for the first time, fans saw how deeply Isaac understood the emotional battlefield his family had become. He wasn't just describing their conflict, he was naming the quiet, aching truth that defined them. Later, in another confessional, he adds something that cut even deeper. "It's hard when the people you love the most can't even be in the same room. I get why my siblings left. I get why my parents are hurt. But sometimes, I feel like I don't belong to either side anymore." That sentence, "I don't belong to either side anymore," echoed across social media after the episode aired. It was the rawest moment of the season, and it came from the one person who had spent the least time talking. In 2 short sentences, Isaac said what years of family meetings, therapy sessions, and interviews never could: that love wasn't enough to fix what control and resentment had already destroyed. For viewers who had followed the Plaths from the beginning, it was almost shocking to hear Isaac break the unspoken rule of the family: silence. For seasons, the Plaths had lived behind emotional glass, letting audiences see their fractures but never quite naming them. Isaac shattered that glass with compassion, not anger. He didn't attack anyone. He didn't point fingers. He just told the truth. And somehow, that was more powerful than any confrontation. In the fandom, reaction came fast. Reddit threads lit up. YouTube commentary channels ran analyses titled, "Isaac finally says what we've all been thinking," and "The moment Plathville changed forever." Fans flooded comment sections with heartbreak and praise. One wrote, "He's the only one who seems to see both sides without hate." Another said, "That boy has more emotional intelligence at his age than the adults do combined." Even longtime viewers who had defended Kim or sympathized with Barry had to admit, Isaac's words were impossible to dismiss. He wasn't rebelling. He wasn't bitter. He was grieving. And that grief made everything suddenly real again. Because beneath the show's surface, the rules, the rebellion, the separation, there was a family still trying to love each other, even as they failed at it. Isaac's honesty reminded viewers that the pain wasn't about religion, or fame, or even control anymore. It was about loss. The loss of unity. The loss of trust. The loss of home. In another later episode, when Isaac sits with Barry at the dinner table, the silence between them feels louder than words. Barry tries to talk about the future, about moving forward, about letting the past go. But Isaac's face says everything. He's listening, but he's not convinced. You can see the conflict play out in his expression. The son who still respects his father, but who now sees the cracks in his authority. At the same time, Isaac doesn't turn his back on Kim either. When he visits her new dance studio, there's warmth between them. Awkward, but genuine. He helps her move equipment, listens to her plans, and offers quiet support. But when the producers ask him how he feels about her separation from Barry, he hesitates again before answering. "I just hope they both find peace," he says. "But I wish it didn't have to happen this way." It's such a simple line. I wish it didn't have to happen this way. But it captures everything. The disappointment, the heartbreak, the loss of a family identity that once felt unshakable. Isaac wasn't defending or attacking anyone. He was mourning what used to be. And maybe that's what hit viewers hardest, the realization that Isaac, the one who spoke the least, had become the emotional center of Welcome to Plathville. While the adults and older siblings were caught in cycles of blame and independence, Isaac had quietly evolved into the mirror that reflected everyone's truth back at them. His 2 sentences, "It feels like no one's listening anymore," and "I don't belong to either side anymore," became symbolic. They weren't just commentary on the Plaths. They were commentary on what happens to families everywhere when communication breaks down and pride takes over. When love becomes conditional. When truth is treated like betrayal. By the time the season closed, fans weren't just watching Isaac grow up, they were watching him wake up. He had seen too much to stay innocent, but he still had too much heart to grow cynical. He was becoming the quiet bridge between the past and whatever future the Plaths might still build. Commentators started calling him the soul of the show. Others said he might be the only one who could ever bring the family back together, not because he was trying to, but because he still believed they could be. In the final episodes of Season 5, when Isaac says goodbye to Barry before heading off for flight training, his maturity shines. There's no resentment in his tone, only understanding. He hugs his father, tells him he loves him, and walks away. Not from his family, but toward his own story. That moment, more than any argument or dramatic scene, felt like the show's emotional climax. Because in the quiet strength of Isaac's words, the Plath story found its truth. Sometimes the youngest one sees the clearest. For viewers who had spent 5 seasons watching everyone else fight to be heard, Isaac's moment of clarity was a kind of healing. Not for the family, but for the audience. He didn't fix the divide. He didn't rewrite history. But for a brief moment, he reminded everyone, on screen and off, what it means to still care, even when everything falls apart. And that's why those 2 sentences will be remembered. Not as drama, not as gossip, but as truth. Isaac Plath didn't just describe his family, he defined its heartbreak.
When Isaac finally spoke, something shifted. Not just in the Plath family dynamic, but in how the entire Welcome to Plathville story was perceived. His quiet truth acted like a mirror, forcing everyone, Kim, Barry, the siblings, and even the viewers, to look at what had really happened beneath years of rules, faith, and polished family imagery. In the weeks and episodes that followed, you could feel the weight of his words rippling through every scene. For the first time, Kim and Barry weren't the center of control. They were reacting. Their youngest son had named the pain they'd been trying to deny, and there was no way to put that truth back in its box. Kim's response came first, in fragments. During one emotional confessional, she admitted that the separation from Barry had been harder on the children than she expected. "I thought we were doing what was best for everyone," she said softly, her eyes damp. "But I don't think I realized how much hurt was already there." For years, Kim had been the dominant force, the decision-maker, the disciplinarian, the architect of the Plath family's rules. But now, stripped of that control, her self-reflection felt unsteady. You could see flashes of guilt, then defensiveness, then sorrow. She spoke about wanting to rebuild her relationship with her children, but her words were heavy with the realization that she might be too late. Meanwhile, Barry's response was quieter. Typical of his reserved nature, he was still in the family home, still surrounded by the memories of what used to be. But even he seemed changed. Viewers noticed a softening in him, a gentleness that hadn't always been visible in earlier seasons. He began talking more about regret, not in dramatic terms, but in small, almost whispered reflections. "I wish I'd listened more," he said in one of his Season 5 interviews. Maybe we were too focused on doing things the right way and not enough on understanding what our kids needed. It wasn't an apology, not fully, but it was the closest thing to one the Plath patriarch had ever offered publicly. Fans saw it as progress, even if it came years after the damage had been done. Still, the divide between Kim and Barry grew sharper after that point. Kim, now living separately, pursued her dance studio and independence, focusing on rediscovering who she was outside of motherhood. Barry tried to maintain what stability remained, especially for the younger children still under his roof. Their paths, once perfectly aligned, had split into 2 philosophies of parenthood. Kim seeking reinvention, Barry clinging to tradition. And then there were the older children, the walking proof of the fallout Isaac had described. Mariah remained the emotional lightning rod of the family's conflict. Her pain with Kim never truly healed, despite brief attempts at reconciliation. Mariah's interviews revealed lingering resentment and confusion. "I love my mom," she said in one confessional, "but I don't trust her. Every time I try to talk, it feels like she's still trying to fix me instead of just hearing me." That single line, "I don't trust her," echoed Isaac's earlier truth, that the Plaths had become a family that couldn't listen without trying to correct. Ethan and Olivia's distance deepened as well. Their marriage, already strained by the family's history, grew heavier under the pressure of choosing sides. Ethan's bond with Barry wavered between cautious communication and quiet resentment. Olivia, weary of being blamed for breaking up the family, started stepping back from filming altogether. For her, the show had become a reminder of a system she'd escaped but couldn't fully leave behind. Micah, on the other hand, embodied freedom, but even his independence had a melancholy edge. His modeling career thrived, and he often spoke about how living on his own helped him discover who he really was. But when asked about home, he hesitated. "I miss the idea of family," he said in one scene, "but I don't miss what it felt like living there."
Each of them, in their own way, reflected Isaac's quiet truth that love wasn't the problem. The inability to face that love honestly was. Publicly, the Plath image couldn't survive the emotional exposure. The days of being seen as a faith-based perfect household were over. Early on, TLC had sold the Plaths as a wholesome alternative to mainstream reality drama, a family guided by spiritual conviction, raising their children with old-fashioned values. But by season 5, that facade had crumbled completely. Instead of purity, fans saw pain. Instead of control, they saw consequence. What was once marketed as moral strength now looked like emotional rigidity. And for the first time, the Plaths weren't just a curiosity, they were a cautionary tale. In interviews, Kim's tone became more self-aware. She acknowledged her mistakes in how she had enforced rules, admitting that good intentions don't always lead to good results. But she also couldn't quite let go of her old beliefs. "I still think we did a lot right," she said. "We protected our kids. We gave them a strong foundation. I just wish they could see that." Barry, however, showed a different kind of regret. He started attending counseling sessions with some of the younger children and expressed a desire to rebuild without judgment. His scenes with Isaac became some of the season's most emotional. Two men, one young and one older, quietly trying to meet each other halfway. There's a moment where Barry tells Isaac, "You're growing into a man with your own mind. I'm proud of you for that." It's a small moment, but it carries decades of meaning. For Barry, it's an acknowledgement that control doesn't equal love. For Isaac,
It's proof that truth-telling didn't destroy the family, it began to heal it. Fans responded with mixed emotions. Many applauded Barry's humility but criticized Kim's inability to take full accountability. Others sympathized with her struggle to redefine herself after years of living as a wife and mother under strict expectations. The comment sections under clips from those episodes turned into debates about forgiveness, faith, and the limits of parental authority. What stood out most, though, was how audiences began to shift their loyalty. The children, once seen as rebellious or ungrateful, were now viewed as survivors of an emotional system that demanded silence. The parents, once seen as steadfast and righteous, were finally seen as flawed, human, and uncertain. Isaac's simple statements had broken the spell. By the end of season 5, the Plaths were no longer a family to be idealized. They were a family in recovery, awkward, fractured, but finally honest. Kim and Barry still lived in separate emotional worlds, their communication polite but distant. The older kids continued to navigate their boundaries. The younger ones looked up to Isaac, not just as a brother, but as a quiet example of balance. In a way, that was the real transformation of Welcome to Plathville. The show stopped being about perfection and started being about truth. And it all began the moment Isaac decided to speak. There are moments in life when the truth doesn't come crashing down in anger or chaos. It slips out quietly, and yet somehow, it changes everything. That's what Isaac did. Just 2 sentences, a few words that didn't accuse or blame, but exposed the reality every Plath had been running from. They weren't loud, but they were powerful enough to echo across the whole family. When Isaac spoke, he wasn't rebelling like Ethan once did. He wasn't crying out like Mariah or walking away like Micah. He was simply being honest. The kind of honest that doesn't hide behind politeness or pretend everything's fine. For years, he'd watched his parents build a world of rules, and his siblings slowly tear those rules down. And standing between both sides, Isaac carried something no one else could: understanding. He saw everyone's pain. He saw the cost of silence. Those 2 sentences, the ones fans still talk about, became more than just words. They were a moment of emotional truth. They forced every sibling to face their part in the divide. For Mariah, they landed like a mirror she couldn't look away from. Her pain was raw, her anger justified, but even she began to see how much that pain had spread. The moment Isaac spoke, you could see her face change, like she realized her little brother had carried a burden he never asked for.
Her confessional later showed it. He's growing up faster than he should have to. I wish he didn't have to pick sides. For Ethan, who had long carried resentment toward his parents, Isaac's words hit differently. He understood rebellion, but he also saw that what started as freedom had turned into avoidance. There was guilt in his eyes. You could sense that he knew his silence toward his father and distance from his younger siblings had its own price. When he heard Isaac speak, it wasn't anger that showed. It was recognition. Micah, ever the quiet realist, probably understood Isaac best. In one episode, he reflected that he'd learned to just love everyone from a distance. And that's exactly what Isaac was trying to do, to love his family without losing himself. Micah saw the strength in that, and you could tell that for the first time, Isaac wasn't the youngest anymore. He was the truth teller. As for Kim and Barry, those words haunted them. For Kim, they revealed the emotional fallout of years spent controlling everything. For Barry, they highlighted how far his family had drifted from the unity he once preached. Isaac didn't point fingers, but he didn't need to. His truth exposed what no one had dared to say, that the family wasn't broken by rebellion or fame or outsiders. It broke the moment love became conditional, and that's something every parent, every child, every viewer could feel. Watching Isaac, fans didn't just see a young man speaking about his family. They saw themselves. Anyone who's ever lived in a home where love was mixed with fear, where truth came second to appearances, understood that look in his eyes. It wasn't anger, it was sadness. The kind of sadness that comes from realizing you can love people deeply and still need to step back to stay whole. Hi friends, this is Sarah from Sister Wives Chapter and Reality Scandals Daily. I've watched this family since the very beginning, from that picture-perfect farm to this moment of raw honesty. And I'll be honest with you, this episode hit differently. I think about Isaac, sitting there between two worlds, his parents' faith and his siblings' freedom, and I can't help but feel emotional. Because how many of us have been in that place, loving people who see the world so differently that every conversation feels like a test, trying to hold on to peace when no one else will stop fighting long enough to listen. That's the cost of truth in a divided family. It hurts before it heals. And yet, I think Isaac understood something profound, that silence doesn't save anyone. It only delays the inevitable. His words, gentle as they were, did what no argument or ultimatum could do. They stripped away the illusions. They reminded everyone, and us, that truth is not betrayal. It's love in its most honest form. I remember watching that scene for the first time and feeling my stomach drop. It wasn't because of what he said, but because of what it meant. The Plaths were no longer performing. They were finally being real. And that kind of honesty? It's terrifying and beautiful all at once. After that episode, the online reaction was overwhelming. Viewers filled comment sections with support for Isaac, calling him the heart of the family and the one with the clearest perspective. Others said his words reminded them of their own families, of growing up in homes where love and control got tangled up until no one could breathe. It's why people keep watching Welcome to Plathville. Not because it's perfect, but because it's painfully human. The Plaths used to be known for their rules. Now, they're known for their reckoning. And Isaac unknowingly became the bridge between those two eras. By the time the season closed, something had changed in the air. You could feel a quiet acceptance settling in. Kim seemed softer, Barry more reflective. The siblings, though still distant, started finding their own paths toward peace. And through it all, Isaac stood as the reminder that healing doesn't start with apologies or new rules. It starts when someone tells the truth out loud. I keep thinking about those two sentences, how simple they were, how honest, how they shifted an entire family narrative. Sometimes the most powerful moments aren't the ones filled with shouting or confrontation. They're the quiet confessions that finally let the light in. Maybe that's what the Plath family needed all along. Not another sermon, not another rule, just someone brave enough to say what everyone already knew. And for anyone watching, maybe that's the lesson too. Families break in silence, but they also heal in truth. It's not easy. It costs you comfort, reputation, sometimes even relationships. But honesty has a way of clearing the fog. It shows you what's left standing when all the noise fades away. So to Isaac, and to anyone who's ever dared to speak the truth in a family that didn't want to hear it, thank you. Because truth doesn't destroy real love, it tests it. And when it survives, it becomes something stronger than before. Friends, I'd love to know what you think.
Do you believe Isaac's honesty helped the Plaths begin to heal? Or did it just expose wounds that were too deep to fix? Let me know in the comments. I read every one. And if you've ever been that quiet voice in your own family, I hope you know your truth matters too. This is Sarah, and you've been watching Sister Wives, Chapter and Reality Scandals Daily. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video if you felt something real today. Because sometimes, telling the truth doesn't end a story. It finally starts the right one.